Hello, I am Tanwi. I am a postdoc at Argonne. So today I am going to talk about a new architecture, diffusion convolution recurrent neural network to capture spatio-temporal data. And the use case here is road traffic forecasting. This work has been done with Prasanna Balaprakash. So the problem here is given the historic traffic data like speed, flow, we want to and the distance matrix or connectivity between location on the road, we want to forecast the future traffic, the same matrix like speed, flow. So it's a large scale machine learning problem. So before going into the model, I want to discuss a little bit about the data. In the data, how we are getting the data. The data has been captured by Caltrans Performance Measurement System or PEMS. So a bunch of sensor has been spreaded over the road network, and those are like inductive loop, radar, those captures the time series data and give us this like timestamp, the ID of the sensor, district name, highway name, and most importantly the total flow and average speed on that sensor. Along with that, we have the location of each sensor. So this ID is the sensor ID and this is the latitude and longitude, the specific location of that sensor. So we have the data of whole California. In whole California there are district like district 3, 4, and there are total 18K sensors. Among the sensor, few sensors are bad. So finally we have almost 12K sensor of 2018. So this is spreaded over all California as shown in the map. If we look into, if we zoom in into the map, these are the sensor locations spreaded over the highway network. So given that location, we want to find the distance between each of this location. So for that we need the driving distance between two location. We get the driving distance by querying OSRM server, and this gives us the driving distance. So given that data set, our problem is to, given the historic data set, our problem is to learn that function age so that we can forecast the same thing in future. So what are the different challenges for doing that? If we try to model time series data of a single location, then we will lose the information, the spatial dependency. Because this road network has complex spatial dependencies. And if we want to model the spatial dependencies in terms of convolution recurrent neural network, then this will be formed as a grid. But what is the problem if we formulate in that way? So this is the example where you can see that these two sensors are very close in the location and this is far apart. But these two blue sensors are in the same direction of the roadway, and the red one is in the opposite direction. So if you see the graph of the speed, so the blue plots are for these two blue sensors which are very close to each other, and the red one is the speed is very different in the red sensor, red location. So though these two sensors, the red and blue, these two sensors are very close in the Euclidean space, but the flow is very different in these two locations. So we can't formulate this problem in terms of convolutional neural network because this formulate as a grid. So we want some better representation. What is that? So this problem can be solved if we represent this in terms of graphs. So we can imagine this graph nodes are the sensor locations, and the connectivity between these two nodes are basically the driving distance from one location to another location. So, the adjacency matrix we formulate in that way. So, this is the normalization. We do some use some Gaussian kernel to do the normalization. So, here is the Vi and Vj is the two sensor location, and the distance is the driving distance between two. And here we use a threshold value k to introduce sparsity in that matrix, because if one sensor is very far from another sensor, so there is no point in considering the driving distance between that sensor. So, and because of introducing the sparsity, the complexity of DCRNN reduced. So, instead of in terms of n, it reduced to number of connected edge for that sensor. So,
can you explain what the direction?
So, direction is the connectivity. So, these 2 points are two location, like A and B are the two location on the road, and if this road are connected, then you can draw one edge between.
So why is there an arrow on the end of the edge though?
So, this is connected in both ways, like you can go from N to F and from F to N as well.
So, from A to B you can only go in one direction?
Yeah, if it is that way, then it's a sample representation.
So, it's like a one-way road?
Yeah.
Oh.
If it is a one-way road, then the representation will be like this.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So, the diffusion convolution recurrent neural network. Here I am going to introduce, there are two parts of this DCRNN. One is diffusion convolution, which captures the spatial dependency, and another is recurrent neural network, which captures the temporal dependencies. So, here you can see that diffusion is a natural process of going from higher concentration to lower concentration. Here the traffic is in this node is going over time, is going from this node to this node and this node to this node. So, in this equation, if you see, we are considering the in degree as well as the out degree to incorporate the outgoing and incoming traffic for a particular node. So, that is how we are capturing the spatial dependency of the network. And this is recurrent neural network. So, in recurrent neural network is to capture the temporal dependency. So, if you see, like each of this cell is getting one input and the output of the previous state. So, in that way it consider the previous state and calculate the output of that state and is passed forward. In DCRNN, we used encoder-decoder version of the recurrent neural network. So, which is used for forecasting as well as language translation, where the encoder part take the input and then it train the model and learn the input and pass the state to the decoder, and decoder then produce this output. So, here you can see that for given x1, x2, x3, that decoder forecast x4, x5 and x6. So, the thing is that here we are, instead of using the normal cell of in RNN, here we are using the diffusion convolution cell here. So, this is a custom cell which I have shown you earlier to capture the spatial dependencies of road network. So, in this recurrent neural network, instead of that normal cell, we are using DCGRU cell and forecasting this traffic. So, given 12 hours, given 60 minutes of traffic, we focus 60 minutes ahead. So, this is the whole forecasting architecture of DCRNN. So, this is the input graph sequence, this is the encoder and this is the decoder which is doing the prediction. So, given this network, we have a very large data set, about 12K locations on whole California. So, we need to scale it up because one single DCRNN with this data set is not been able to learn at a time. So, what is the idea to scale it up? To scale it up, the basic assumption is that the traffic from the north of California doesn't impact the traffic of south of California. So, we can partition the whole network into piece of small networks and learn simultaneously. So, for partitioning the graph, we use MATIS. So, MATIS first coarsen the graph and find the initial partition and then refine each of these partitions. So, we use MATIS because it's very fast, and along with that is give good clusters, like compact clusters. So, this is one example of whole California network, which I have shown the whole California network earlier. This is a small portion of it where you can see the result of partitioning. So, each of these colors represent one partition. So, using MATIS, we partition the whole graph into this kind of smaller subgraphs. And this is the DCRNN architecture for scaling these subgraphs. So, here each of this partition run simultaneously on each GPU nodes and produce the result, and we aggregate the result at the end and see how the network is performing. So, for data set, we have this we have the 11K data set, and we partition it 2 partition, 4 partition up to 1024 partition. So, this is the these are the number of nodes for each of this partition. So, in case of the whole so we use LCF system Cooley to train DCRNN, but the single instance of DCRNN is not trainable in the memory is not sufficient to train the single instance DCRNN. So, we are able to train 4 partitions to up to 1024 partition in Cooley. So, if you see the result here, so this is for 4 partition and this is up to 1024 partitions, and it is in terms of so the error has been calculated for each of this location, and the distribution of MAE error has been plotted here in terms of box plot. So, the error has been reduced from 4 to 8 and 8 to 64, and the 64 is the optimal partition, and then it started increasing because the spatially correlated partition has been separated in different partitions. So, in case of 1024 partition, we had hardly 10 to 11 nodes per partition. So, this is not sufficient to capture the spatial dynamics. So, that is why the accuracy got reduced. If we see the time of execution, so in case of 4 partition, the execution time is 2800 minutes, and it is reduced to almost 40 minutes in case of 1024 partition. So, this is the result for one particular two particular partition, how DCRNN is performing. So, this is the error has been calculated in terms of mean absolute error, and this is the plot of mean absolute error. So, you can see that the error has been gone to 6 MAE max. So, this is the forecast of almost 3 months of data, and you can see that DCRNN capturing the spatial and as well as the temporal dynamics well, and this curve is following the predicted curve is following the observed curve. So if I zoom in and see one day prediction particularly, then this is the one day prediction where DCRNN is following the observed traffic of a day. So in summary, DCRNN captures the spatial and temporal dynamics together very well, and it can be scalable. It can be scalable up to 12K nodes and without any performance degradation. Yes.
Can you capture temporal dynamics with other types of neural networks than the Argonne one?
Other types means?
Like CNN or fully connected? I mean, why have you worked with the recurrent neural network?
So in recurrent neural network is to capture the temporal dynamics. Like in I have shown. Let me show. So in case of CNN is to capture the spatial dynamics because it formulates the problem in terms of a grid as an image, and if you want to capture the sequence of images, then you have to use RNN along with CNN. So in case of using CNN along with RNN, there is a problem I have shown in the very first slides, I guess. Let me show it again. So CNN captures in terms of grids, in terms of images. So if we capture the problem in terms of images, then these 2 points, the blue and red point, will be very close in the grid. But this blue point will be very far. But that is not the correct representation of this problem. We want this 2 point close and this red point far. That's why we represented it in terms of graph. Yes, please.
So your error didn't seem to change that much with the number of partitions, which seems like it might indicate that the spatial variation isn't that important. So is that something that you...
So the thing is that the change of error, if you see the median of only, there is slight change. There is slight variation. It's increasing after 64 partitions, is it? So the thing is that this is the aggregation of all sensors. So there are almost 12K sensors, and this is the distribution of MAE of all 12K sensors. If you see the individually, there is a lot of change when you divide it into 1024 partitions. The performance degrade a lot, and we have seen that if we include the overlapping region, like suppose this is a small partition, if we include the region nearby where the connectivity can be there, like we divided because of the graph partition. So if we include those nodes, then the performance increase significantly.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
So the first is kind of related to the question about CNN. What if you converted some of the temporal data into like a grid?
Mm-hmm.
So what if you converted some of your temporal data into a grid-like feature? So if I'm a sensor and I'm reading the state, and then I have a grid where I have past states.
Yes.
So now it is kind of a classification. Has that been done with CNN or?
So the thing is that temporal in terms of grid means it should be one after another in case of temporal.
I guess if you're looking at classification, like if you were just looking at classification like an X, Y of, I'm imagining it to be like pixels, where that's like your image.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is, can't you sort of say, oh, in this, I mean, you can turn some historical data into an equivalent. So can you use, or has CNN been used for like something like that?
So something like a heat map or
Like a what?
so something like a heat map?
Yeah, possibly.
So-
or
so-
where you have
So-
your current state and then you have your past states.
Yeah,
And you
so-
kind of turn it into like an image link.
So you could potentially do that, but you know, if you look at this time series data, so time series has this inherent relationship. You know, something that happens at time t minus k has an influence at time t. Like, you know, take traffic jams. You know, in particular, we want to model these type of, you know, traffic jams and things like that. So you know, whatever that happens at time t minus k has sort of a wave ripple effect at time t. How to model that? The proper way is recurrent neural network, or, you know, type of recurrent neural network such as GRU or LSTMs. That helps to sort of keep a short-term and a long-term memory of time series. So that's the component that sort of models the time series aspect of it. So when it comes for different sensors, you know, this also, to answer the other question. So if you look at these 2 points, right? So these are the blue and red. If you represent this as an image, these two are nearby pixels, but they have vastly different characteristics because, you know, traffic that is coming out of the city is red, and blue is traffic that is going into the city. So even though the pixels are nearby, if you cast this as an image problem, they have vastly different characteristics. You know, we cannot just take that and cast that as sort of, you know, a grid problem. So that prevents us from modeling this as simply a grid and representing all these points inside the grid.
Yeah, I think maybe what I'm thinking of, if you were like, if you reduce the model, like if your perspective was from your sensor versus the whole space.
Yes.
That's just thought. But I
Okay.
can
Yeah.
talk a
So
little
you
bit more
were
about
talking about more aggregation. You know, so sort of aggregate
Yeah.
everything and representing that as a.
Yeah, I
as
have.
a-
I mean, I can talk a little bit after, but there was like one thing that I, like for weather prediction, that sort of thing. That's kind of what I have in mind. If you're, especially something that is, yeah. Anyway.
Sure.
So just one thing, like if you represent in that way, it will change over time, isn't it?
Yeah, but if, yeah,
It will change over
Right,
time.
but I'm just saying that, like, if you maybe want to just have, if you care about snapshots or events, like specific events in a history, could you then turn that into its own?
So if you see that this is a snapshot, like in 5 minutes duration, in 5 minutes frequency, is the traffic is aggregated over 5 minutes, and so we are taking snapshot of kind of thing. So it's changing over time. So
My second question was, is there any sort of simulation that, like a traffic simulation that can help improve the speed prediction?
I think Prasanna can answer that question better. The simulation thing.
So we are looking at some of the simulation aspect. You know, so our collaborator is looking at it. So in particular, so there are multiple ways to combine simulation with the actual data. So one thing is simulation doesn't use the real data because you know, they make assumptions about the traffic flow, and they use fundamental traffic flow diagrams for discrete event simulations. And one way is, can we use data and model that using neural nets and use the neural nets instead of simplified assumptions to make the simulation more realistic. The other point is, can we generate data from the simulation, as you said, and augment that for, you know, so we have pretty good coverage on highways, but not on arteries. And model, if you have to model the arteries, because, you know, that's where, you know, a lot of the traffic goes out and coming from the neighborhoods, we don't have data. So one way is, you know, can we do some simulations, different scenarios, and then use that data and augment that with this one to improve the prediction accuracy. So there are multiple ways that we could potentially think of combining simulation and learning.
So you would just have, like, simulation data would just sort of be another set of data beyond
Yes.
just the data that you're sensing.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So in the graph that you show the predicted and the real data, what kind of quantitative measure you're comparing, say L2 norm or what? Because
This
you
is
showed
the error, how this error has been computed.
like that. Can you go to the last slide?
This one.
Yeah.
So this is the plot between observed minus predicted. So
What I would say is what kind of measure you're comparing the two to say that your model does well.
So the thing is that we are minimizing the loss is mean absolute error, and after minimizing the loss, that is the prediction we are getting. So and we are plotting the actual time series data along with the predicted time series data. So
Right, but I understand that. But, I'm
but
saying is,
in terms of quantify that thing,
yeah.
I again used mean absolute error. So if you for this thing, if you want to understand this thing, so for each of this location there are 12k locations. So for each of this location I calculate the MAE error between the observed minus predicted, and then so for each of the sensor I am getting one MAE, and this is for 12k sensors. So this is the distribution of MAE for 12k sensors. Yes, please.
I have that question, the same related to that same graph for speed versus time, where you compare between the predicted versus observed.
Yes.
So my question is that did you get was the observed data obtained from the already collected data? You know, did you do a kind of a split of the data where you
Yes,
trained
so
the data? And so when you obtain that, I'm just curious that do you then propagate further in time to do further forecasting, and at what point of time do you think that this forecasting might break down?
So the thing is that we are considering 60 minutes of data to focus 60 minutes. So if we and in that 60 minutes we are in the RNN cell we are getting one timestamp and feeding that timestamp and then forecasting again. So it's going on in that way up to 60 minutes. Yeah, after that if we feed that thing again, so it will be like the whole period forecasting will be kind of averaging thing. So it will not, the error will propagate.
So to add to what Tanwi said, if we have 15, so we experimented 15 minutes, 30 minutes and 60 minutes forecast. And as expected, 15 minutes forecast will be better than 30 minutes, and 30 minutes is better than 60 minutes. So if we try to do 120 minutes, the error will keep on increasing. So the horizon that we use, that also determines how much error. So we experimented only with 15, 30 and 60 minutes. So 60 minutes is already like 1 hour. Given the current state of traffic for the past one hour, we want to predict how the traffic will look like for the next 1 hour.
Okay, so you would want to keep, ideally you would want to keep the horizon smaller, like 15 minutes, as you said, 15 minutes is better.
15 minutes is much better than 60 minutes,
Yes.
what is shown here.
So to recast what I was asking, that if you would just have 15 minutes of data and then you predict the next 15 minutes of data, it's going to give you better results, as you say, compared to 60 minutes compared to for the next 60 minutes. So if you recast this as 60 minutes, you have 60 minutes of data and you predict the next 60 minutes of data, as opposed to you have the 15 minutes of data and then you predict the next 15 minutes and then feed it again for like multiple times to generate the next 15. So essentially you are predicting for the next 45 minutes. What are your thoughts on this kind of process, and would that break down as well? And
yeah, so to answer that question, right, what is a good time horizon to use for predicting the next 60 minutes, right? So if we just use 15 minutes as a history and try to predict what happens next 15 minutes, we are sort of forgetting what happened 15 minutes before or 30 minutes before, right? So we are just taking the snapshot of 15 minutes and trying to predict the next 15 minutes. And compared to that, if you take 60 minutes and try to predict next 15 minutes, your prediction will be better. The reason being that if you see the diffusion process, the diffusion is, simply said, it's about, okay, things go from higher concentration to lower concentration. There are many cars on this one particular location. They will go from one location to another location, and what is the rate at which it flows from one location to another location? That's what we want to learn from the data. Because that depends on the time of the day of the week, and so on and so forth. And we don't want to explicitly tell the network how this will flow. We just give the training data and let the network learn how much flow will happen given this state on a particular day and on a particular time. So given that fact, if you take 60 minutes of history and try to predict next 15 minutes, your prediction accuracy will be better compared to, say, okay, 5 minutes or 15 minutes and try to predict next 15 minutes. Is it? So you have a lot more history to play with because that's where the LSTMs and grooves are going to help you to keep track of what is happening in the past. And the diffusion process will help you to sort of learn the diffusion process over a period of time. So now you have a better history to do prediction.
Okay.
Does it answer your question?
Yeah, but I have lots of other questions and probably.
Okay.